Here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Yeah. Welcome back to the show, folks. Happy Tuesday. Yeah, Joe and I were just talking about how nice it is outside right now. It's actually, or at least, I don't know what the temperature is now, but it was below 70 degrees. Yeah, it was 68 degrees. I was driving around. I saw some deer. Matter of fact, when I saw it was below 70, I was like, the deer are going to be moving right now. I mean, because it broke below that 70 degrees, I'm telling you. Although then I saw a report with the Weather Channel last night. It was really depressing. It said that basically the southeastern quadrant of the United States is going to experience higher, well, really the nationwide, but specifically, I was focused on the southeastern quadrant. They say higher than normal temperatures from October through December across the country. Which makes me really, really sad. I'm going to start praying for winter. I mean, like, actual winter. But we'll see. You know, the global warming people and the Greta Thunbergs of the world going to obviously use that. We've got a lot to get to today on the program. I honestly don't even know where to begin as I was looking at all of the headlines. Because I've got some, like, pet peeve frustrations that I really got to talk about. But then you've got this climate change summit that happened. Well, first of all, on Friday you had the climate change walkout where people in New York City, they were given an excused absence if they skipped school to go protest the climate. And then in Washington, D.C. yesterday, you had weirdly like people in like men in Daisy Dukes protesting the climate. At least that's the photo that I saw, making people late, blocking intersections, chaining themselves to poles and stuff. Very, very weird times that we're living in, I'll tell you that much. Coming up on the program today at the bottom of this hour, I want to introduce you once again to Brigadier General Robert S. Spaulding. If you missed our first interview with him a few weeks ago, he's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. He focuses on United States and China relations, also economic and national security. He does have a new book out called Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. It's always good to talk to him, and we're going to be specifically talking about the saber rattling going on and the potential war with the government of Iran. So we're going to be talking about that coming up at 6:33 this morning. And then really excited to have Mr. Luke McCoy on the program. Luke is with the Family Council here in Arkansas. I found out more at familycouncil.org. And we're going to be talking about, talked about this yesterday, the biblical, the early church and the biblical history of Christians protecting little babies that were not wanted, and it's going to be a fascinating discussion. And he said, and he called me and he said, "Yeah, hey, is it okay, if we kind of go this direction with it? And I'd like to bring up these scriptures and that." And I was like, "Man, bring it!" I said, "Bring it." I love it. I love it when this program is a platform to talk. To talk gospel and to talk, church history and theology, whatever. It's always a thrill for me, actually. Telephone number this morning, 870-275-9799, if you would like to be on the program today. All right, so let's start here. I got to start here. Sorry, but this is, now everyone's freaking out. They're now totally ignoring, the mainstream media is deciding to totally ignore Joe Biden and his obvious corruption, his admitted corruption, because he's dumb enough to do it on film. They've decided to totally ignore Ukrainian officials from the past that say that Joe Biden did exactly what the right and the president is saying Joe Biden did with his son and holding the $1 billion. And now we have the Associated Press this morning. The Democrats are going to talk impeachment later today. The Associated Press this morning headline, Trump ordered aid frozen. More Democrats want impeachment. Okay, so you have, of course, Mitt Romney being a stereotypical rhino, but you have now the report. Okay, it's a report by the Washington Post, and then they say it was confirmed to the Associated Press that days before the phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, Trump decided to freeze some $400 million in military aid to Ukraine days before he had this phone conversation. Okay, listen to this. Trump's order was first reported by the Washington Post and was confirmed to the Associated Press by two people familiar with, but not authorized to discuss, private conversations. They spoke on condition of anonymity. So once again, we have another headline based on anonymous reporting, anonymous sources that we don't know who it is, and they're going to run with something that we're going to eventually find out is not true. I mean, now maybe it is true. And you know what? Even if it is true, it still highlights the fact that Joe Biden withheld $1 billion so that his son could continue making $50,000 a month on the board of a corrupt energy company that the government of Ukraine was investigating, but he said, you got to fire that prosecutor or you're not getting $1 billion. Oh, and by the way, let's do China next, and let's talk about, matter of fact, here's Rudy Giuliani on Sunday. And the only reason I'm playing this is because you're not going to hear this stuff anywhere else unless you're listening to conservative outlets. This is Rudy Giuliani, Fox News Sunday with John Roberts. Listen to this.
Finding dirt on Joe Biden and or his son to use politically in 2020.
Well, that's the way you characterize it. It's certainly a program.
That's the way it appears to line up.
No, it doesn't.
You went there
That's
for
the
one
way-
thing, you
that is
found
the
out
way-
something else,
that
and
is
that's
the
when you've
way
been digging on since.
The pro-Biden media lines it up. This began with someone coming to me saying, this information can clear your client about the corruption in Ukraine between Ukraine, the Democratic Party, the ambassador, and the FBI agent who investigated the case.
But then it morphs into Biden.
Inextricably combined, because Biden had the guy fired, Shokin. By the way, his statement's on record. The lazy press could go read it. Don't have to listen to me. There are 3 videotapes of prosecutors on record, available on here, that nobody has covered for 5 months because this town protects Joe Biden. His family has been taking money from his public office for years. $1.5 billion from China when our vice president is supposed to be impartially and independently negotiating for us, and the kid, he takes him on Air Force Two to China.
That was in 2013.
Yeah, and the kid, unfortunately, is a drug addict. China didn't give $1.5 billion to his kid, Biden's kid, a recovering drug addict, Kerry's stepson, and Whitey Bulger's nephew. Ladies and gentlemen, go look at what the press has been covering up on you. Can you imagine?
This is a company called Rosemont Seneca. Let me just come back if I could
for a second. Whitey Bulger's nephew.
Let me just stop for a second.
$1.5 billion coming from China when our vice president.
Mr.
That
Mayor,
doesn't shock you?
let me stop for a
Man,
second
how
because
far have we deteriorated?
let me stop for a second because we are
Stop.
throwing
All right,
around
right.
a lot of Ukrainian names.
Yeah. Try to shut him up there. We don't want this. See, even Fox News is like, oh, what are you talking about? We're not going to cover this stuff. Yeah, Whitey Bulger's nephew, John Kerry's stepson, and Joe Biden's son in on this deal with China, $1 billion. Yeah. Perfectly legal to take money from China if you're a politician's kid. China couldn't directly give that money to Joe Biden. That would be wrong. But we can enrich your kids. Oh, by the way, this headline from Talk Business and Politics, Joe. Headline, Governor Hutchinson says permit approved for $1.5 billion Sun Paper project. Heads now to the Middle East and India to recruit more businesses. This from Wesley Brown, Talk Business and Politics. Nearly 4 years after announcing the state's first blockbuster deal with China, Governor Asa Hutchinson on Monday said the State Department of Environmental Quality has finally approved an air permit to begin construction on the much-awaited $1.5 billion Sun Paper pulp mill in China, Delphia, Arkansas. So let me just game this out for you. Once again, and by the way, I just want you to know there are so there are people besides me, okay? There are people who are very uncomfortable and worried that Arkansas's leaders are continuing to attempt to bring the Communist Chinese Party to Arkansas disguised as in companies. There are people who are very concerned about it. That much I can tell you. Now, if this does go through and Arkadelphia does become Chinadelphia, it will not be good for Arkansas. That is my contention. This will not be a good thing for Arkansas. This will be a bad thing for Arkansas. That's number one. Number two, I still got money that these deals will never happen. That's my other assumption. I will believe it when I see it. And number three is, I think the fact that the governor is now heading to India in an effort. Now listen to this. Following his now he's going to the United Arab Emirates with Mike Preston, the new Secretary of Commerce. Now after he goes to Dubai, so he's going to. So Saturday, Governor Hutchinson and Arkansas Secretary of Commerce Mike Preston will head to the United Arab Emirates on a first-ever state visit to the Middle Eastern nation. After he visits Dubai, Hutchinson and Mike Preston will then travel to India from September 29th to October 6th as part of efforts by the Trump administration to enhance economic development ties between the countries. So, I think that he's now going with this Trump administration program or whatever to India to try to get some more economic development businesses in the pipeline, because I think the governor is at least looking at these 6 Chinese deals and thinking, these may not actually work out because of the trade war with China and because it just stinks to high heaven. And I'm sorry. I mean, you look at what China is doing to Hong Kong. You look at China's 100-year plan. You look at what they're trying to do to us economically. Folks, they're not benign. They're not benign. It's every bit more concerning than if these were Russian companies. If we were bringing Russian companies in, the Chinese would pose a bigger threat than if these were Russian companies that we were doing business with. And yet, where are the people in Arkansas? Where are the other elected officials who are willing to stand up and be like, I don't like this. This doesn't seem like, it seems like we're selling the state of Arkansas to the Communist Chinese Party. Anyway, but nearly 4 years after announcing it, by the way, it's really not that big of a deal. It's the governor's own agency that's giving him a clean air permit, by the way. The governor's own agency, after 4 years, has finally decided, hey, you've got a permit to begin construction. Now, previously, the governor said construction will begin, I think, next year sometime. But I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. These deals, regardless of whether or not they come to fruition, I will continue to maintain these deals are not good for the state of Arkansas because of who we're dealing with. It's one thing to trade with countries. It's another thing and by the way, I want to remind you, in every country that China does business, when they go in, the first thing they do is they grease the politicians. Why would we think Arkansas is any different? We've got plenty of corruption going on in Arkansas. But when they go into Cuba or Mozambique or any of these other countries, before they get what they want, before they get the tax incentives or they get the first thing they do is they get the politicians on their side, and they do it by giving them money. Why would we think Arkansas is any different? And that is why I have, and by the way, Again, I can't stress this enough. There are people who are very concerned that this is going on. Let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. Again, headline, Governor Hutchinson says permit approved for $1.5 billion Sun paper project. Man, when you put this story up with what Rudy Giuliani just said about Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, John Kerry's stepson, and Whitey Bulger's nephew, it just is like, ugh. And then when you put it up next to the Hillary Clinton email scandal, when you find out that Hillary Clinton's emails were being forwarded to a Gmail address with the same name as a Chinese company in the Shandong province, and then you realize that the 6 Chinese deals that we have here in Arkansas are from the Shandong province or Shandong or whatever. I don't understand how there's not more people connecting the dots and are saying, do we want to be associated with this? Do we even want the appearance that the state of Arkansas is even connected with this? Not to mention my point from yesterday, which was the Democrats are now the party of socialism. The Democrats are really the party of outright communism, and Republican leadership in Arkansas is trying to do business and bring the Communist Chinese Party into Arkansas. I mean, why would we be doing this? Well, because China, they're actually free. No, they're not. Well, investors, they look at the market just like everybody else. No, they don't. But that's what the governor said, that the Chinese look at the market just like any American prospector would. Give me a break, man. Come on. This is ridiculous. We're going to take a break. Telephone number 870-275-9799. We'll be back. Hey, by the way, vaping, climate change, and pedophrasty. Look it up. That's what our board says. And if you'll figure it out, we'll talk more about it later. All right, folks, hey, welcome back to the program. As you can see, the microphone has kind of switched sides. That means we have a live guest in studio. I want to welcome back to the program. State Representative Jack Lading is with us. Jack, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's always great to have you on. Can you just talk a little bit about an announcement that you made? I saw on Facebook a day or so ago. So what's the announcement?
Well, I really wanted to get that out sooner, but I was thinking about it, praying about it, making sure that I wanted to make the right decision. But I have decided to run for another term. Of course, it'd be my 4th term. I believe we've done a lot in the last 3 sessions, largest income tax cut in history. We've had 3 income tax cuts, and I know there's been some tax increases, but I think we've done some great things. And there's more work to do, and I want to be a part of that. This job is not easy, I'll tell people that. You see some people not wanting to run for a 4th or 5th term.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
There is an old Jerry Seinfeld bit that made the astute observation, or just asked the question, why the Chinese couldn't figure out spoons and forks, and instead went with chopsticks. Now, I'm sure you couldn't say this now because it's politically incorrect, but it was like you'd think they'd figure it out. They got people in fields with shovels and rakes and stuff, but they're not going to make a little one of those to anyway. Arkadelphia, I mean, you know, there are people on Facebook saying I'm not very good with chopsticks. Yeah, Chinadelphia. All right, what else do we have here? Let's see. Greta Thunberg and allies file climate complaint against 5 countries. Not China, though. Not China, because even though they're the largest, I guess they just figure, like, well, we're not going to be able to get China to do anything. Give them a break. Right? Go ahead and play this video. Go ahead and cue this up, just so you can hear the outrage. It's the YouTube video. Go ahead. Right there. This is Greta Thunberg.
I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
All right, we'll go ahead and stop there. Babylon Bee with Satire website, they had a pretty funny take on this. Marionette strings clearly visible during Greta Thunberg's testimony. That's right, folks. Climate activist and adolescent Greta Thunberg gave a passionate speech at the UN Climate Action Summit, declaring, "How dare you? You've stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. This is all wrong." Savvy viewers, though, noticed there were marionette strings attached to the 16-year-old throughout her speech. Hey, wait a minute, one attendee shouted. Those are puppet strings, kind of like on Thunderbirds. This caused some uproar, with everyone tracing the strings to see who had brainwashed this young girl into thinking the world was ending and pulling her strings. Actually, Greta, honey, your childhood, you're going to look back in about 10 years and realize that you're the victim of child abuse. You're the victim of brainwashing akin to the kinds of people that worship Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And that brings me to this word. It's called pedophrasty. An argument involving children to prop up a rationalization and make the opponent look like an a-hole, as people are defenseless and suspend all skepticism in front of suffering children. Nobody has the heart to question the authenticity or source of the reporting, often done with the aid of pictures, or in this case, a 16-year-old girl. Oh, and by the way, we're doing the same thing with vaping here in Arkansas. Back in a moment.
It's a difficult job, and it's part-time.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of your effort. And some people just get burned out, quite honestly. But I think we need to do what we can, and I want to talk a little bit about the positives in a minute. But we need to promote our state. We need to talk about positive things. some of the things that grab all the airtime nowadays are really negative. They don't help us. They don't help move our state forward. They don't help the people of Arkansas. We need to talk about things that make the lives better of our Kansans, and that's what I like to talk about. So that's the reason I want to go back. I think I've still got something to give, and I want to help the state move forward.
Well, I will say I always definitely know that you are a positive guy. You definitely want to look. You're a half full, glasses half full kind of guy.
Yeah, some people say I'm too positive sometimes, but hey, I'll take that.
Well, some people say I'm too negative. So
goes both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So talk a little bit about one of the things that I watched you do this past session was chair the public health committee. I thought you did a really good job of that because there was a lot of bills that came your way that were they were hard. I mean, it's a very busy committee, right?
It's a difficult committee, a very important committee, very important things. When you talk about the health of people, and a lot of people don't realize, but all of the work-related bills come through that committee. So we're talking, workers' comp, the environment, lots of things come through there. But I really enjoyed that job. One of the favorite things I used to like when I was mayor was running the city council meetings. Mm-hmm. And I know some of the mayors are laughing when they hear that because that's tough because you get all kinds of people and viewpoints coming in, and you're bouncing a lot of balls. You got a lot of balls in the air, but to me that is really enjoyable because you see people coming out. You know what is important to people when they come out to these meetings, and they're adamant about their beliefs. And that's the same way with these committees. You attended some of the meetings and the rooms were full. We had to have security guards in there a couple of times. Yeah. And we went late at night. I think one night we went till 9:30. Matt had to come down and tell me to quit because I was keeping the guys too late. Yeah. But it's important, and it's a lot of energy there, and you know that these things are important to people when they come out like that. When they drive all the way to Little Rock and they sit down in front of 20 state representatives to present their point, it's an important thing to them.
We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. Where did you fall down again on it seemed like the one deregulation bill that the medical society was against, but it got through, was the optometrist deregulation. And now we have this movement to try to put it on the ballot to
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. Hey, welcome back to the program. We've got Brigadier General Robert S. Spalding, who is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. He focuses on U.S. and China relations. General Spalding, how are you, sir?
Great. How are you? Good morning.
Doing fantastic. I'm glad you could spend some more time with us. I want to remind everybody about your book that's out. We talked about this last time, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. Let me ask you this about that in the context of that book. Are America's elites still asleep, you think?
Actually, most of them still are, or they're in denial. However, some have started to wake up. In fact, last week, Schwartzman, the head of BlackRock, mentioned that, essentially China had taken advantage of the U.S. Now, this is kind of the first mention of anything like this out of Wall Street since all of these tariffs and everything started to take place.
Wow. Okay. Well, that certainly is a good development. I also know that you certainly focus on foreign policy, national security as well. What are your thoughts on the situation in Iran right now? I've got this CNN article. Forgive me for using a source from CNN, but exclusive. Zarif threatens all-out war in case of military strike on Iran. This was, last week this story broke, and a lot of people were expecting some sort of response because of the situation in Saudi Arabia. How do you see it, General Spalding?
Well, first of all, they've made those kinds of claims before, and they don't have a really capable military, so I'm not that concerned about that. They do seem to want to continue to cause mischief. I think a couple of things. One is and this in the context of the book, the Chinese support them to the tune of billions of dollars. Their banks, their companies support the Iranians and their missile development. They support them in their wrecking of chaos in the region. So I think one of the things that we haven't done that we probably should do is focus on putting sanctions on Chinese banks and businesses. At the same time, the Iranians have to understand that if they continue to cause this mischief, there's going to be repercussions. Finally, just in our own energy markets, we can create the kind of shock absorber for the world that we couldn't, since the Middle East really took over the oil industry. We have the ability to pump a lot of oil, almost 20 million barrels per day here in the United States. What we lack, though, is refinery capacity, and we really need to build that up. So it's a combination of being strategic in terms of how we look at energy security, but at the same time punishing those, not just the Iranians that are supporting this stuff.
Do you think, you mentioned the refinery capacity? Obviously, I don't know, are we building more of those? I mean, you would assume that the environmental left would be against all of that, right?
Well, that's exactly right. One of the things that we have an absolute abundance of here in the United States is natural gas. Now, the flex fuel vehicles, the E85 vehicles, actually can burn ethanol. You can take natural gas and turn it into ethanol, and it's a much cleaner fuel. We haven't built any of those types of facilities. So, yeah, in addition to the EPA being very hard for building a petroleum refinery, we could turn gas to liquid here in a big way in the United States. We just haven't made those kinds of investments.
We're talking with Brigadier General Robert S. Spalding. He's retired from the United States Air Force, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, also the author of this new book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. Do you appreciate, let me ask you this, I mean, it seems to me that President Trump does not want to get involved in another conflict in the Middle East, or at least a prolonged one. I mean, I don't know, I'm not in his mind, but to me it seems like his foreign policy is more like, hey, listen, we're going to respond in kind to your threats, and we'll bomb you back to the Stone Age and come home. What are your thoughts on that? And are you weary of a potential drawn-out conflict in Iran?
I am, and I think the president's foreign policy really matches one of earlier time, Eisenhower. So Eisenhower was really about using the military for deterrence. So making sure you had a big stick in case you needed to use it, but not being interventionist. At the same time, he was about building the economy. So we built things like the Eisenhower National Highway System that contributed to economic growth here in the country. We need to invest in our infrastructure and industrial base, STEM education, research and development, all of that. The money that we have been spending in the Middle East is taken away from. They're all of historic lows, or really in infrastructure, we're $5 trillion in arrears. So while we spent trillions of dollars in the Middle East, our own country has been decaying, and I think the president wants to get to that, and what he understands is jobs and economic growth will come out of that.
I could not agree more with that statement. It's very, very well said. Turning now to Hong Kong, what are your thoughts about what's going on in Hong Kong? I mean, to me, it's refreshing that the American flag to people over there means freedom of speech. It means liberty. And while we may be burning it over here, some of us, over there, it's a symbol of hope. What are your thoughts on Hong Kong? What should be done?
Well, I think finally we're beginning to see what the Chinese Communist Party really is, and the kinds of things that they do. I try to tell people that they have these machines where they keep bodies alive, dissidents, religious dissidents that are essentially sentenced to prison in China, and then they harvest organs for them. So you can right now schedule a heart transplant next month because they'll be guaranteed to pull one for you. That's the kind of regime that we're dealing with, and finally, for the first time, people are beginning to wake up, and it's primarily because of the kids in Hong Kong are standing up for their own freedom.
Hang on. I would just like for you to repeat that for us. You're telling me that there are, like, machines that keep dissidents alive, and then they go and they harvest their organs.
That's exactly right. And so the first country, and the only country, by the way, to ban travel to China for organ harvesting was Israel. A heart surgeon over there realized what was going on because one of his patients said, "Hey, I'm going next month to get a heart transplant." He said, "How can you schedule it?" And so he did some investigation and found out, yeah, they were taking dissidents, essentially taking their organs and killing them, and they created an industry out of it. I just don't think people understand what the regime is capable of.
So you're telling me that we have elites across the world that are going to China, scheduling these organ transplants because they know that there's essentially a human organ harvesting farm over there. And it reminds me of that movie The Island with Ewan McGregor, where they've got clones. You know?
Yeah, it's terrible, but I mean, there was an independent inquiry done in the UK. There's a lot of people have come forward, surgeons, people that have experienced this. They understand what's going on. Of course, the Chinese Communist Party just does a great job of hiding things, but all the information's there. The mainstream media just hasn't portrayed it because the Chinese Communist Party has huge sway in the United States and elsewhere, and that's what the book's about. It's really talking about how they've influenced us to consider them to be something other than what they are, which is really a horrible regime.
And then you've got the current president of China, who's essentially changed the rules, and now he's going to be the leader for life. Which, I mean, it reminds me of Mao. Are there similarities between President Xi Jinping and Mao, in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, he gave a speech just a few weeks ago where he mentioned the word struggle 60 times. They haven't used that word since Mao. And so it evoked for many of the Chinese the Cultural Revolution, which was a horrible time when many people were killed, many people were forced into these gulags where they were brainwashed. And so the China that I lived in from 2002 to 2004 has taken a turn for the worse. Of course, the Chinese Communist Party hasn't changed their nature. They've just become more visible. And again, thanks to the kids in Hong Kong for forcing them to show their hands.
Can I ask you about foreign investment? I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but the Chinese government, they go into countries and they want mineral rights. They want they promise jobs. In my home state of Arkansas, we have 6 Chinese companies that are supposed to come here at some point in the future. All that is kind of tied up and on hold because of the trade war. I've talked to people that think it's a Trojan horse. Do you kind of feel the same way? What are your thoughts on how they're a developing nation under World Trade Organization rules, and yet they can interject billions of dollars into these other countries?
Yeah, in fact, they create these onerous loan terms that nobody really knows because they're all done in secret, and usually it involves paying somebody off. But I think that the most egregious thing for Americans is if they're coming to America to invest money, it's because they've taken money out of Americans' retirement funds. So right now, Wall Street is sending money from our retirement funds over to China. And what they do is turn around and come back and buy some strategic piece of technology or property here in the United States with our own funds. And of course, you'll never see that money again because the auditing and the transparency requirements within the country is absolutely doesn't follow any convention here in the West. So I mean, it's really they really are clever in the way they do things, and we have been just absolutely rated.
Okay, that's huge news about this. Essentially, it's a cycle coming from America to China, then back into America. Again, we're talking with Brigadier General Robert S. Spalding, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, author of this book, Stealth War. And you need to check it out, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. Real quick before we go, I'd like to get your thoughts on what's going on with the Ukraine. And, I think there's a lot of people now that are really becoming aware of what Vice President Joe Biden did. Of course, the media is trying to say this is not a Biden story, it's a Trump story. But then what about China? Because if you start looking into China and Biden and his son Hunter and then John Kerry's stepson and apparently Whitey Bulger's nephew, what's your reaction to all of that?
Well, so the dirty secret here in D.C. is that this is what people have been doing, and it really is, again, about the book. It's about Americans selling out America for their own greed, and this thing with Biden's son is no different.
I really appreciate it, General Robert Spalding. It's always great to talk to you, sir, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Thanks so much.
All righty, folks. We're going to make a smaller YouTube video of this. A lot of news, really a lot of revelation in this one video specifically. And the reason it's relevant to Arkansas, folks, is because, again, we've got these 6 deals where we're trying to bring in Communist Party entities disguised as companies here in Arkansas. And I just don't think it's good for the state, yet our leaders do. It'll be up at the YouTube channel. Go ahead and click the bell for notifications. Click the subscribe button and the little bell for notifications. Please subscribe to Conduit News over at YouTube. We're going to be back here in just a moment. Sound off on Facebook. What did you think about what Brigadier General Spalding just said? Back in just a moment. Do it. What are your thoughts on all that drama?
Well, that's a deep subject. We could spend the whole show on that one. But, there's 2 sides to this question. The medical community, they're wanting to protect their turf, but they're sincere about that. They want high quality medical care, and that's great. The other side is we want to be able to provide medical care to rural areas in Arkansas at as low a cost as possible and as high a quality as possible. So that's the debate, and I've had many discussions with Dr. Spite out here at NYIT, Dr. Patterson at UAMS. I've gone to meetings in Denver and Nashville and talked to other chairmen of other committees in other states about this issue. It's an issue for everybody. So what it comes down to is we're debating a number of scope of practice bills which would allow treatment in rural areas. The question is, can you maintain the quality of that treatment out in these rural areas with people that do not have the same level of education? So the nurse practitioners don't have as much education as the doctors, optometrists don't have as much education as the ophthalmologists. So where's the sweet spot there?
Yeah.
How do we provide that medical care at the accepted quality level in rural areas without affecting our doctors and our good medical system that we have? So that's the question. And we had about 4 of those bills. The optometrist bill was the only one that got out of committee and eventually got out of the legislature.
And signed by the governor.
And so again, as I said earlier, you have groups that are very adamant, and the medical community, and I don't hold this against them, they're adamant about maintaining high quality standards. And that's why you see them going so far and spending so much money on this issue. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, this is the first issue. There will be others. We have 20 interim studies, not all of them are medical, for the Public Health Committee. That's the most of any committee down there. So we've got 20 things that are being studied in the interim. And again, that could be another full show. But
yeah.
So there's a lot of interest in this. A number of them are these scope of practice bills. So we're going to see much more of that. And the battle is going to be strong. It's going to be. And I was talking to, well, I won't say who, but one of the medical professionals the other day, and I said, where I stand on this is education. So in the interim, I want to bring information to the committee members so that they understand, because some of them are not doctors or nurses. So because if you don't have the knowledge, when a subject comes up, the 2 sides go to their corners.
Yeah.
And they stand firm on that because they don't know. They don't have the information.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We've got a whole generation of kids who are being brainwashed. They are being brought up in a culture of fear. They think that the world is going to end. And Greta Thunberg is now their spokesperson, just like David Hogg, the survivor, or one of the survivors at the school, the shooting down in Florida. And the left, by the way, if you criticize her at all, You are a part of the problem. And yet they could criticize that Sandman guy. That kid was perfectly fine to criticize, who was just wearing a MAGA hat, with his buddies on a high school field trip. So our whiteboard today says vaping, climate change, and pedophrasty. What is pedophrasty? Well, look it up. I'll tell you. What do you want to say, Joe? You got a lot on your mind. I can tell.
So, Greta Thunberg and David Hogg they stepped into the political spotlight on their own accord.
Well, we think so.
Well, yeah.
I mean, honestly,
let's operate off the assumption they did it on their own.
They have handlers, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we know that.
I mean, Greta Thunberg's handler is connected to that foundation that's funded by George Soros, Bono, and Bill Gates.
Oh, yeah.
So, and by the way, she's been brainwashed, and she talked about, you've stolen my hopes and my dreams and my childhood. No, honey, you're going to realize in about 10 years that you were a victim of child abuse, and the puppet strings will come off at some point. But go ahead, Joe.
But they were brought into the spotlight willingly for the most part.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
The MAGA hat kid from D.C.
He was just minding his own business.
He's minding his own business. He never made a political statement until he was drug into the political spotlight by people who claimed he did something wrong.
Yeah.
And even then, he really didn't make any political statements. He just said, this is what I was doing. This is what we were doing.
Yeah.
These Thunberg and Hogg both consistently made willing political statements. And yet, the one kid out of the three that never made a single statement got criticized the hardest.
Yeah,
and the other two were not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, and I left one of Thunberg's statements was, the science has been clear for 30 years. I wanted to be like, I'm sorry to be so, mansplaining, but I want to be like, honey, you think 30 years is a long time, do you? Is that, you're 16 years old, so I 30 years, for 30 years, even if that is true, which it isn't clear over the last 30 years, but climate change.
Do you know what we talked about?
When we're talking about the amount of time here, and considering we really didn't start keeping records till, 1850?
You know what we talked about yesterday, or the thing I brought up to you yesterday? That the UN in 1989, 30 years ago, released a report that said that a lot of countries would no longer be here in by 2000.
They'd be underwater. And that's the thing. The reason that man-made climate change, to the extent the left is saying is not real, is because banks. I should just leave it there. Oh, because banks. If this stuff were real, there's no way banks would be giving people loans to build properties, to develop properties, where if the science is actually true and your house is going to be underwater in 12 years or 50 years.
That's a massive financial risk.
Exactly. It just wouldn't happen. And so the dollar here actually speaks very largely because you have banks that are not going to make stupid investments if it were real. And that's all you need to know about why it's a scam.
And just okay. And then moving away from banks, look at the political elite of the world. They wouldn't be buying houses near coastlines.
Exactly. Yeah, Barack Obama's multi-million-dollar house in Martha's Vineyard. Yeah,
$35 million on a piece of property that spans like 40 acres worth of beachfront property.
They don't believe it's real. Not to mention the whole "don't eat meat, don't eat meat." The Democrats had an event where they cooked 10,500 steaks this past weekend. They don't believe that it's real. It's all about control, and they've brainwashed these little kids, and they're brainwashing some adults who really think that, and really what this is a new religion. It's Gaia worship is what it is.
Did you see Chris Ann Paul's statement that she made on Facebook not too long ago?
Chris Ann Hall?
Yeah, Chris Ann Hall.
I did not see that.
It was about climate change, and that there are over time of us being aware and being able to study from afar, of course, other planets in our solar system, that they have noticed that similar cycles occur in other planets like Pluto, even though it's not considered a planet anymore.
Pluto is a planet. No, go ahead.
Pluto is going through a warming cycle as well.
Yeah, I mean
it's a planetary cycle that
it's a
happens.
thing.
Like it's just a cycle that happens. We'll go through another cooling cycle probably in a couple decades.
It's a circle
from now.
of life, Joe. You know?
It's just how things work.
Like, when the antelope die, their bodies become. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass.
And we eat the antelope.
The telephone number 870-275-9799. Let's see here. Man, can we go back for a second and talk about, did you hear what General Spaulding just said about China and the body machines? But the body, if you're just joining us, we were talking with the Hudson Institute and author Brigadier General Robert Spaulding, who's written this book on China. And he detailed how the reason Hong Kong is up in arms, the reason you're seeing these protesters do what they do, is because the idea of extraditing a dissident is the fact that you're basically going to be sold for parts. By the way, Asa Hutchinson wants to do business with these people. Think about that for a second. Israel has banned travel to China if you're, I'm assuming if you're going for a heart transplant, because he just said that elites across the world are scheduling heart transplants. Well, how do you schedule a heart transplant? Well, you've got a dissident. And he said they have these machines now. You put the body in, you keep them alive, and you go and harvest their organs, like a heart or a kidney or whatever you need. I mean, we talked last week about forced abortions, and if, you violate their one-child policy, they'll take your land or they'll just come get you in the middle of the night and they'll kill the baby. And sometimes, what are they doing with that baby, right? We know that Planned Parenthood and these biological labs, they find baby body parts very valuable. Sick stuff. It's one thing to trade with countries that have terrible human rights abuses like Saudi Arabia or China. But it's a whole nother thing for Asa Hutchinson, who's essentially a real estate agent, selling the state to China and bringing communist Chinese entities. It is a Trojan horse. It's bad for the country. It's bad for the state of Arkansas. But let me reiterate what I just said. It's bad for the country. It's bad for the United States of America. And yet, yesterday, Asa announced that his Department of Environmental Quality has finally given the permit to begin construction on the China-Delphia plant with Sun Paper from the Shandong province, the same province that houses the company that is the same name as the email address where Hillary Clinton's emails were being forwarded to. Look all of this up. It's the truth. You're getting the truth here this morning about Conduit News, or about on Conduit News. You're getting the truth. You're getting the truth about Arkansas here on Conduit News. What is wrong with me? I guess I am being... Anyway, let's see. Some of your Facebook comments. Let's see. Oh, wow. This is sickening. How desperate is the governor gotten? Well, now he's going to India, which I actually think might be better. The Trump administration is trying to bolster relationship with India. And I don't know about you, but I mean, it still might not be a good idea. Again, listen, I disagree with giving taxpayer incentives and the government being involved with picking which companies go where. I disagree with that policy just in general. But if you're going to do it, why not do it with somebody else besides China? Why not try to get an American company that's located somewhere in America and bring them to Arkansas instead of China? Again, they've got machines keeping people alive and harvesting their organs, and that's why Hong Kong is up in arms. They don't want to be able to be extradited. That was the whole point. You get extradited, and then guess what? You're dead. Anyway, we've got one more hour coming your way next. This first hour was a doozy. See what we can do for you in the next hour. Don't go anywhere.
Broadcasting from the Baker Implement Studios. Baker Implement, serving you with 11 convenient locations. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM Jonesboro.
And we don't want that. You can't accomplish anything like that. So you've got to have the education out there, let people understand, have knowledge of what we're discussing. Yeah. Because I'll just use the doctors and nurses as an example. doctors are going to believe one thing, nurses are going to believe one thing. We on this committee, which are made up of doctors, nurses, engineers, whatever, are going to have to make the decision. So we hear both sides. So the more knowledge that we have of these two sides, the better decision we're going to make. But there are going to be changes in Arkansas in the medical application, and I want to make sure that we're making the correct ones.
Yeah.
The best thing I can do is to help educate or get knowledge to the people making that decision.
What do you think, though, about the fact that the medical society, they did take this one loss with the bill that allowed optometrists to do, say, what optometrists in Oklahoma have been doing for 20 years. You know, the ophthalmologists think that it's a major change. Optometrists say it's minor and that they're already trained to do this in optometry school. It was debated vigorously.
Right.
I mean, it was.
Yes, it was.
And it passed vigorous debate in the committees and on the House floor and vice versa on the other side.
And it was a close vote.
But then it was signed. And now the ophthalmologist lobby comes back. They start paying for signatures. They're trying to undo what we just did. Now, obviously, it's their right to do that. But what are your thoughts on trying to undo what you guys just put in place?
Well, obviously, you know, I don't like that because the people elected us and we went and made the decision. We made the votes. So what they're doing is going against the will of the people when they do that. And as you know, that's not a good thing. When the people talk, I like to listen, and I try to listen. And I think everyone should take that approach, but everyone doesn't. But again, you've got to put yourself in their shoes. You know, they're protecting their turf.
That's true.
You know, and and they feel adamantly about that. I mean, we could talk about gun control, the same thing. You have these groups that feel so strongly about that they're going to do everything in their power, take every opportunity and use every political or legal tool that they can to hold their turf. And the medical society is no different than the gun lobby. You know, they're protecting what they think and adamantly think is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's why they do that. I don't hold grudges. I don't feel badly towards a group for doing what they think is right. I'll disagree with them.
Right, exactly.
But then I'll go buy them a cup of coffee, and we have to do that.
Yeah.
We have to be that way. We really do. But before I forget, the Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee that I chair, we're in a joint session now. So we have joint, Senate and House together. And I'll be chairing the October meeting. So I'm having that in Jonesboro.
Wow. Okay.
On the 7th and the 8th. And we're going to be out at the Human Development Center. We're going to tour that. We're going to have a presentation on by the architectural group that's looking at updating and rebuilding some of the HDCs around the state. They've already started in Booneville. They're looking at Jonesboro. We've got new ideas on how to improve those, so that's going to be on the agenda. And I'll miss some things here, but we're going to meet there. We're going to be out at ASU that night to tour the new convention center. So we're going to bring about 50 people here from all around the state, and they're going to see. I mean, Jonesboro Human Development Center is one of the best in the state. I think it's the best, but it's one of the best. We got this convention center coming up. People are going to see that. We're going to go to ASU. They're going to see what's done out that campus.
Yeah.
The next day, we're going to be out at the NEA Baptist Hospital at their conference room for a meeting and talk about medical issues. Then the chamber is going to present our industry here in Jonesboro, which is the best in the state. I know I'm right about that because I've been around the state and lived in other areas. So they're going to present what we have here in industry out in our industrial park. Then we're going to take a bus tour out in the industrial park and go to one of the factories. So
that sounds like it's in October. Do you know the date?
October 7th and 8th. That'll be a Monday and a Tuesday.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's a big deal, Jack.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's why, Paul, our legislators that have been down there a while now, me included and some of the other guys, we've been there long enough. We know people. We've got into a leadership role, and don't get me wrong here. I mean, I'm not running the. If I was running the show, I'd do things differently. But I am involved.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hour number 2 coming up at the bottom of this hour. We'll be talking with Luke McCoy. He's from the Family Council, and we're going to talk about traditional American values, being pro-life. What does it mean to be pro-life? What's the history of protecting those innocent babies? And we're going to talk to him about that coming up at 7:33. We really appreciate it. State headline for you: Governor, Little Rock Schools oversight is state duty. So the Little Rock School District still going to be under the supervision of the state of Arkansas. They're going to slowly give local control back to the Little Rock School District as good schools or as schools perform better. And the ones that don't perform well are still going to be under state control, and this has caused the left in Arkansas to claim that the State Board of Education's policy is resegregating schools. They believe that the Board of Education's framework is tantamount to resegregation. And Governor Asa Hutchinson yesterday had media availability, and he said this, quote, "I absolutely reject the proposition that this is a resegregation of the Little Rock School District. That is wrong. It's not based in fact, and it is really trying to resurrect old history that has no application today," end quote. So, that is a good statement. I thought, you could go further than that, but at least here it's like, hey, of course, a lot of time, anytime somebody suggests somebody's racist or your policy is racist, and that's what the suggestion is, people get really defensive. But it's exactly right. It's just like this suit that we talked about yesterday. The state's involved in this suit where they're being sued. By the way, we elect our Supreme Court justices because there's never been a Supreme Court justice who's black, and they're upset. They want the whole suit to me is racist because it's like, well, we're only 15% black. The population of Arkansas is only 15% black, and that's just not fair. And so a statewide election means that we're not going to have equal representation on the court. Well, that's assuming that if you're the color of skin, you just vote you vote the same way because of the color of your skin. I find that incredibly offensive. Hopefully the courts will throw it out. So that is the news. Little bit of news, state news there. We told you last hour that the governor has announced that the permit has been approved for a $1.5 billion Chinese project. This is the one down in Chinadelphia, and this is really not news. It made headline over at Talk Business and Politics, but it's his own agency, the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, that's approved an air permit. So it's like, But what it does show is that the governor's still committed, at least for a time, to continuing these Chinese deals and hoping that they happen. At the same time, he's trotting off to India. He's trotting off to the United Arab Emirates first, Dubai. He's going to Dubai on Saturday. And then he's going to India, trying to get jobs to come here. Now, I can assure you that one person that wouldn't be comfortable with the governor's carbon footprint is this poor girl named Greta Thunberg. Yeah, you've heard about this. This goes right with our whiteboard, our board, rather. Our board today and the rest of the week says vaping, climate change, and pedophrasty. What's pedophrasty? Well, it's a word that's I think it's a made-up word, but I have found it as far back as 2009. Some people on Twitter was like, "You're just making this word up to criticize Greta Thunberg." They just don't like the fact that this totally encompasses it exposes the strategy of the left. I have found it on a website as far back as 2009. So, but it is on Urban Dictionary. I kind of like the Urban Dictionary version of this. What's pedophrasty? Well, it's an argument involving children to prop up a rationalization and make the opponent look like an a-hole. As people are defenseless and suspend all skepticism in front of suffering children, nobody has the heart to question the authenticity or source of the reporting, often done with the aid of pictures, or in this case, a girl that's got puppet strings attached to her, who is really the victim here of child abuse. And she's the victim, and she's going to find that out eventually. She's 16 years old. She's being used. And also, her handler is part of that organization that Bono, Bill Gates, and George Soros, although now, of course, the liberal media tells you that if you mention George Soros, then you're somehow anti-Semitic, which is ridiculous. Of course, that didn't stop Hollywood. Can we hear her speech again first? This girl, I got a text message from a friend. This girl, listening to her makes people want to break glass. Makes people want to eat glass. By the way, weird story. Coincidentally, last night, I ate some glass. Accidentally. I'll tell you about it later. Joe, this is the YouTube video. Courtesy, let's see, what is this? The Daily Caller News Foundation on YouTube. Listen.
It's all wrong. I shouldn't be up here.
That's right.
I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Stop. So the cure is socialism. The cure is socialism, if you didn't get that. Eternal economic growth, that is code for we can't focus on capitalism. Socialism will allow us to control the weather. That is what the left says. Socialistic policies equal weather control. And it's really sad. I do have empathy for this young lady because I do believe. Now, some people think she's an actress. I mean, I think she knows what she's doing, but I do believe she genuinely is afraid for her life. Do you think that, Joe, you think that girl is genuinely afraid for her life? You think she really, you don't buy it at all? I mean, I can see why you wouldn't. There are plenty of people that are not given that platform, that are young, that do actually believe that we are at the beginning of a mass extinction event. They actually do believe that entire ecosystems are collapsing. And it's really the saddest thing in the world. This little girl has been brainwashed. This little girl has been absolutely brainwashed, and she is no different than those people who were fake crying when Kim Jong-un passed away. Or Kim Jong-il? Which one is in power now? Kim Jong-un is in power. So remember when Kim Jong-il passed away, and these people in North Korea doing what the state tells them to. Really, I don't think there's any difference in that. And by the way, on Friday they had the climate protests in New York, across the country, and New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said that the kids get an excused absence. So we have a government-sanctioned political activity. You have all of these children that believe that their climate is fragile, is on the brink at any moment. We only have 12 years left before it's irreversible, which is preposterous. They've pulled that number out of you-know-where. Joe, you were just reading to me some of the... do you have that list handy? Joe was just reading to me just a few of the ridiculous statements that have been made over the last 30 years. 30 years ago, the United Nations had a report that said many countries today would be completely flooded and underwater. By the way, if you're a Christian with a biblical perspective, I do want to remind you of the promise that God made to never flood the entire earth again. Just FYI, when we start to kind of listen to their predictions, I feel like it's important to keep that one in mind. You know what the rainbow is really about. Go ahead, Joe.
So this is a list of doomsday predictions, quote unquote, and there's 41 on this list, but
we don't have to go through all.
Yeah, the picture that I have in front of me only has 29. But what I want to focus on here is that we see in the 80s is a lot of when the climate change, like the global warming began to become a problem, quote unquote. Dial it back a decade. In 1970, there was an article put out, or a report put out, Ice Age by 2000.
Okay.
Ice Age. 1971, new Ice Age coming by 2020 or 2030. And then a new report after that the next year, Ice Age by 2070. In 1974, space satellites showed new Ice Age coming fast. Also 1974, another Ice Age. In 1976, scientific consensus, planet cooling, famine's imminent. So, and then 1978, no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend, which means so. And
then what happened?
I would assume within. So I would assume what they mean by this is by 2008 would be when the cooling trend would start slowing up and it would start warming again, or at least go to some level of neutral climate, whatever they want to call it. But within a few years, started talking about droughts. Temperatures in D.C. will hit record highs. Rising sea levels will obliterate nations if nothing done by 2000. That's the UN's report.
That was in 89.
Yeah, it was in 1989. And also in 1989, New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019. 2019 now. Pretty sure it's underwater. 2000. This is the year 2000. Children won't know what snow is because of the global warming trends. So these people have been preaching global warming since the 80s, but in the 70s they were hollering about global cooling as the issue.
I have a question for the audience. Is there anybody out there who is young enough to remember that you once anybody out there who used to believe this nonsense? You used to believe it, Joe?
When I was a kid, yeah, because it was all people talked about for the most part.
Well, they went from
global warming was a problem, and it was because we were being super wasteful. I remember my schools implementing recycling bins.
And that, I was about to say, that's where it started for me was, and I think that's back in the 70s, the commercial with the Native American with the tear and them littering on the highway. And then you had Linda Ellerby, Al Gore, Nickelodeon, and then they started just talking about recycling.
Yeah.
And it was recycling first, and then it was like, well, why to recycle? Well, to take care of the environment.
Yeah.
And that has somehow morphed into, if you don't give the government more authority, and now they want to stop economic growth, adopt socialism. By the way, if they know that socialism is terrible for economy and opportunity, but they want it just to be able to control the people as sheep, what better way to excuse the suffering conditions if you're going into it saying, oh, by the way, your life has to get less convenient in order for, you know what I mean? But we're saving the planet. It's literally like, I don't know if you saw, the Apocalypto with Mel Gibson, where, they're sacrificing all these humans, all to just control the population. The elite knew that the eclipse was going to happen because they were smart enough to study the stars. They knew the eclipse was going to happen. So they staged this whole event, and they act like they're appeasing the gods, which, by the way, they probably were appeasing something. And yet they just did it to control the population, right? And it's all and that's what's happening here. You're brainwashing this new generation to beg for subjugation. And to love their leaders for it.
And what's really funny is the people who preach climate change, like not just people who preach it, but the people who follow after it, don't honestly believe it deep down in their heart. Because here's the thing. I remember seeing a picture from a while back. It was a global warming rally, and the aftermath of it was like there's trash
disgusting.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
They don't really know. But I saw a report the other day that in terms of plastic in the ocean, because that's another thing people yell about, is that we contribute too much to the plastic in the ocean. We contribute less than 3% to the plastic in the ocean.
Well,
we are the top of carbon emission reduction in the world in terms of, like, I saw it was a map of the world, and it was colored based off of level of carbon emission.
Yeah.
From different countries, and it wasn't like fully blocked out like the United States was one solid color. It's kind of like a population map.
Yeah.
Whereas this is a more urban center, so it's like a darker color.
Yeah.
China was almost like it was kind of a yellowish brown color.
Yeah.
Like across the board.
And they just give up on
China. Was basically brown, which was like the worst.
By the way, last hour we had Robert Spalding on, Brigadier General Robert Spalding, about his new book on China. Where, if you're just joining us, you have to listen to the first hour. He detailed the Chinese body machines where they keep dissidents alive, and then they harvest their organs. He specifically talked about Israel and how there were people from Israel. This guy was like, well, I'm going to get a heart transplant in China next week. It was like, how in the world can you schedule that? Do a little research, and you find out because they have essentially got the movie The Island over there, where they have these people they're going to just take their heart and kill them.
If you've never seen the movie The Island, watch it. It's actually I think it's a great movie.
It holds up well. It's one of my wife's favorite movies, by the way.
So in high school, one of my teachers let me borrow it. He brought it up to me. He's like, "Hey, have you seen this movie?" I was like, "No." He said, "I think you'd like it," because he knew I was a sci-fi nerd. So he's like, "Hey, I want to let you borrow this movie. You should watch it." I was like, "Okay." So he gave it to me like within the week, and I went home and watched it. And I said, "This is a good movie."
Do you remember that part in the movie where Michael Clark Duncan is trying to run away? The late Michael Clark Duncan, and they spear him in the calves with these because
they don't need his calves.
Basically, like scorpion gun, and drag him back into the operating room.
Like while he's like half open.
Oh man, yeah, dude,
because they didn't need his calves, they needed his heart or
intense.
his lungs.
Hey, I got this. By the way, can you put this Facebook post up there? Here's State Representative Dan Sullivan about an event that happened last week. Friends, our Second Amendment is under attack. Today in Little Rock, the Democrats tried to pass 2 interim study proposals that would start to chip away at our constitutional rights. Thankfully, they were defeated. He writes, furthermore, who we elect truly matters. There's a clear difference between me and my opponent in the Republican primary, that'd be John Cooper, and me on the Second Amendment. He has supported measures that would infringe on our constitutional rights. Let me be clear, I stand strongly for the Second Amendment and will always stand up and protect it. Again, that's Dan Sullivan. These proposals specifically, though, if you look into it here, this was the new business. Let's see, was it 2 and 3? You had one from Vivian Flowers. Let's see. That's a recycling one. That one I think did get approved. But 2 and 3 were by Democrat Denise Gardner, State Representative Denise Gardner. Interim study proposal requiring the Legislative Council refer to the House Committee on Public Health, Welfare, and Labor a study of a possible requirement that a person lawfully carrying a concealed handgun use a restraint holster that decreases the likelihood of a concealed handgun being dropped or otherwise misplaced and increases the safety of both the person carrying the concealed handgun and the public in general. And they defeated that. They said, we're not going to even consider that idea. Interim study proposal number 3, again by Denise Garner, requesting the Legislative Council refer to the House Committee on Public Health, Welfare, and Labor a study on the implementation of a background check system for a person who attempts to purchase a firearm or to acquire a firearm by transfer from a third party. Again, the Arkansas legislature not even considering these ideas. I would like to say thank you. But there are some, who still, there are some Republicans that even are like, well, maybe we should. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Involved in the leadership, and some of the other people from Craighead County and Northeast Arkansas are as well. And just to give you an example, when the speaker during the session had his weekly management meeting, I sat on his right hand. I was the right-hand seat. Dwight Tosh was in there. We were at the table. So what that says
Seriously.
is we have input on these decisions. That helps our area of the state. And so we want to promote our area of the state. And I know you have listeners in other areas, other parts of the state. We're for Arkansas. But again, as I said earlier, we got to present our interests.
You represent your district. I mean,
my
that's what
first
you're
job
supposed
is
to
to
do.
represent District 59. My
Yeah.
second job is to represent Arkansas.
Yeah. We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. He's announced that he will be running for re-election, and so that is a big deal. We wanted to have him on today. Jack, let me ask you real quick, because I've got to ask you, and I will preface this question by saying that State Representative Mickey Gates says he understands why Matthew Shepard is.
Let's face it,
is
times are
moving
tough for
forward,
the Arkansas
and he doesn't
General
hold
Assembly.
any grudge or anything
They're all
like
waiting
that.
for the spotlight
But
exposing
have
public
you-
corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Marlene on Facebook answers our question. I asked the listeners, did any of you believe this climate change nonsense or global war? Did you buy into it in the 70s? Did you buy into it in the 80s? Were you convinced of this, or did you have the same fear that this Greta Thunberg has? Maybe not quite, but Marlene on Facebook says, yes, I believed it in the 70s. Jackie says, we're living in the end times, proof how a majority begins worshiping the created things, not the creator. God gives them over to a darkened mind. People talking about glass bottles. Hey, listen, I had this. I was talking about this with Joe just a second ago. It really feels like we're going back to a pantheistic mindset when it comes to our religion. I mean, this is certainly you're getting young people to beg for socialism with the understanding that their lives get worse. This is different than we need socialism because our lives will be better and the collective and everybody will be da-da-da. No. They're now getting people to accept that we can't have economic growth. This is really twisted, ingenious. No. Your lives are gonna get worse. They're gonna but you've got to do it in order to appease the gods, right? You need to appease the god of the trees, and then you have to appease the god of the wind, and that way a tornado, the god of the wind, won't rip up the god of the tree, and it won't come through your house and kill you and your whole family. You see what I'm saying? It's really weird what's going on if you actually listen to what they say, read between the lines.
you made up your mind yet as to how you think, does he need to be expelled at this point?
Well, what I believe we have to do, and let me just say that Speaker Shepard has done a great job on working on this. Now, I know some people thought he should have done things earlier, but he's taken his time. He's looked at the laws, and he's heard from the different sides. I think he's done a great job. I think he's done the right thing. And I know that many people have talked to Representative Gates personally about this. It would be better if he would resign. Again, I know that he feels strongly about his side, but I think he needs to look at the effect on the state, on the legislature, and on him. And he needs to make the right decision. Being right and having power is not always the right thing. Sometimes you have to make a decision that might not be what you want to do, or it might not be within the power you have, but a good person makes that right decision for everybody.
Yeah.
And I wish Representative Gates would do that. My personal opinion is whatever the law says is what I'm going to follow. And I think most of the folks in the House will do that. It seems to be pretty clear now that there is at least one law that
you guys voted
we
on
have
in
to
the last,
follow.
yeah, the
And
one in the last session.
If that is the deciding law, then expulsion is probably what's going to have to happen.
Yeah. What do you think about? I've read the interviews that Mickey Gates did, and it's like what you said. Being right versus thinking about
doing the right thing.
Because really, this is an image thing. I mean, if we're honest about this, whether you think he should be expelled or not, it doesn't look good when you have somebody who's pled no contest for not paying taxes and that sort of thing. Although I think the whole thing is very interesting. I saw in the paper where Joe Jett was saying we need to go through this other process where both sides, DFNA and Mickey Gates, will be able to present their case. From what I can tell, Mickey Gates thinks that the DFNA did something wrong. I mean, with this whole process. Yeah. And he does cite the fact that he was arrested, and the press was tipped off. But he wasn't arraigned for 3 months, which ended up being like a week before early voting. That's when he was arraigned, and he still got reelected. So,
and Paul, we know that there are things that go on like that are politically motivated by government people. Yes. I won't say agencies, but it's bad actors in the government agency.
We definitely know that. Look at what's going on.
We know that
federal
happens.
Level.
And I mean, Mickey may be exactly right.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us. Man, I saw this article. It was posted up at familycouncil.org. Police find over 2,200 aborted babies at late abortionist's home. This was a story, didn't get a lot of coverage. Pretty outrageous stuff. It's a repost from lifenews.com, but Family Council is really good at keeping their readers, their contributors in the know about what's going on with pro-life issues. Matter of fact, we have on the line with us right now from the Family Council. We've got Luke McCoy is with us. Hey, Luke, how are you, sir?
Pretty good, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I can, actually. That's a really good connection.
I'm on my Bluetooth on the side of the road right now.
Okay.
Rock, so
Okay. Well,
glad to be on here. Thanks for having me.
You're being safe as well, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, so Luke, I mean, we talked yesterday about, what we were going to talk about today, and I thought I've been really excited about this segment ever since we discussed it, because we were kind of going over this idea of infanticide in the ancient world. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, as maybe some of your listeners know, but in case those that don't, Family Council is a socially conservative advocacy organization here in Arkansas. We're actually celebrating 30 years.
Wow.
This past June to next June is sort of our 30th anniversary. So we're very glad to be a part of this work. It's a challenge, but it's also a pleasure. But our main issue, Paul, is basically protecting innocent human life from conception to natural death. And so a lot of people think of the pro-life movement just to deal with abortion, which is the termination of a pregnancy in the womb. But really, we go back to conception. That covers IVF, surrogacy, and all sorts of stuff, and all the way to natural death in the grave. So, but to talk about what you're alluding to, my coworker, I got to give him credit, David Cox, Jerry's son, back in the early part of the summer, late spring, actually, was looking into just how old the pro-life movement is. And many people think it started with maybe Ronald Reagan or James Dobson or some other early member of the conservative movement of the 20th century, but that's not the case. I think what you're alluding to as far as the article on our website, familycouncil.org, people can click on, at the top right somewhere, probably click on our library and click on update letters, and they can select the June, July edition of our update letter. And if people are not a part of our mailing list, again, they can get signed up on familycouncil.org as well. But yeah, you're right. The right to life has not been a 20th century phenomenon. It was clear back in biblical times, as early, or excuse me, as late as the day of Pentecost in Acts 2. We don't find this necessarily in the Bible, but we actually find it in the, and I may not be pronouncing it correctly, but the Didache, or Didache. It is a document that many, even secular and biblical scholars, believe is factual and relevant to the time. But if I may just read a little bit of what my coworker David put in our update letter, it says in the second chapter of the Didache, tells Christians to avoid sins like murder, adultery, fornication, stealing, and even magic. But in the middle of that second chapter, it says, you shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that child which is born. And even other translations will say, quote, thou shalt not procure abortion, nor commit infanticide. And of course, I think a lot of your listeners are familiar with what happened several months ago with the Virginia governor coming out and others. It's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. And even this abortionist that passed away, keeping all sorts of baby parts in his garage. I mean, the investigation's still pending when I looked at it the other day, but you got to wonder, what was he doing? And we hear all this news about Planned Parenthood selling baby parts. I mean, folks, let's not be naive. These people are in it for money. They're not in it just to supposedly help women or some sort of other reason. They're in it to make money. They're doing all sorts of things with precious, innocent human life. None of us would want to be on the receiving end of that. So Paul, you're right. The pro-life movement and this issue of infanticide, Christians were rescuing babies, literally that were just born, babies, newborn babies from the elements when they were discarded. That's also
now that was all legal too, right? Like in Roman society, it was fine to just if you didn't want the baby, you could just leave it in the wilderness, right?
Correct. Yeah. And again, if folks want to go to our June, July update letter on our website, find it. David goes on in this short piece that in the Greco-Roman world, ancient Romans practiced crude forms of abortion, and historians tell us unwanted babies routinely were left to die from exposure on hillsides, on the outskirts of town and villages. And so guess what? Luckily, many Christians would come and either oppose those practices or they would rescue those children. I mean, that's kind of where the idea maybe of where orphanages had started. These kids, these are human beings. They deserve rights just as much as us who are grown or living or loved and appreciated by our families and so on. So it's really sobering to know what went on in those times. It's tragic. It makes me feel so thankful for my parents my mother chose, and I tell her that routinely, that I just am so thankful she decided not to discard me or whatever. And what's even kind of neat too about this pro-life movement being a part of a 2,000-year-old tradition is really Christians have been lobbying their leaders for about that length of time too. You can go back in the New Testament time. Of course, we're just talking about Christians, not even Old Testament believers, but you can go probably even far back as the Old Testament. Moses, pleading with Pharaoh and others. And I'm by far no Old Testament scholar, so please don't quiz me on that. But nonetheless, many instances of where people of faith lobbied their leaders. I think one of the earliest forms of a representative republic is in Deuteronomy 1.
Yes.
Where people were encouraged to choose among them wise leaders from the tribes of Israel. So I say all that just as an encouragement. Obviously, we want to educate people and tell them that, look, this has been going on such a long time. Evil prevails. But nonetheless, we've had people that have been faithful to oppose abortion and to protect and promote the sanctity of human life, especially innocent human life. And so it is, like I said earlier, it is a challenge, but it's a pleasure to do this work, and we encourage everyone to not give up, not grow weary, and doing good.
And I really appreciate those thoughts. We're talking with Luke McCoy, again, familycouncil.org. Go to the website right now. Also sign up for their newsletter if you're not already signed up. Luke, you make some really good points, and we can't deny here in the state of Arkansas the success that we have had as a state in rejecting this evil. This evil that is really a genocide of our children.
Yeah. So, Paul, if I were to say Prescott, Corning, DeWitt, Atkins, these are cities in Arkansas. Do you have any idea what the population of those cities are roughly?
I don't. I know it's small, but
that's all right. 3,100 people. 3,100 people roughly in each of those four cities, but each of those four cities represents individually, how many abortions were performed in 2018. That's according to the Department of Health here in Arkansas. So just to be clear, in 2018, there were like almost 3,100 abortions reported in the state of Arkansas. Imagine if Prescott or Corning or DeWitt or Atkins were just gone. Just imagine that's how many abortions occurred in 2018. But again, I want to be an encouragement. The trend has definitely turned the corner 180 degrees. Why? Because in the peak of abortion numbers here in Arkansas was the early 1990s. We are down 56% from that peak of abortion. So the tide is turning. We've got great pro-life efforts here in the state. We've got more and more pro-life legislators and pro-life policy coming out of the state capitol, and so a culture of life is growing here in Arkansas. People are learning; they're getting educated about the issue. We're glad to be a part of that. Our friends at Right to Life and many other groups have definitely been a part of that. When you share things on Facebook and you talk to your neighbors and your coworkers and your family and so on, please, this is a hugely important issue here. People need to know about. I appreciate tax policy and all the other issues that face us as a state, as a nation, but I think this issue has eternal consequences. So
I can't argue with that, because you're exactly right. It's life and death, and so it does have eternal consequences. And I really appreciate you making this point that this is something that's been going on for a while. As King Solomon said, nothing is new under the sun. And so we've always had this idea where it's a temptation where we as humans, we think of these children as burdens, and we're consumed with selfishness, and we want to do something to get out of that responsibility. Whether it's something as a father abandoning his family, or whether it's a mom that wants an abortion, in the modern day. But like you said, back in the ancient world, there were Christians who were taking care of these abandoned children, on the hillside, and it was perfectly legal in Roman society to do these things. I think having that perspective, that long view, that 2,000-year perspective that you were just telling us about, Luke, is encouraging. It's encouraging because we still are called to stand against injustice, stand on the side of justice, and stand up for those who can't take care of themselves, and that's certainly a little baby, or also trying to protect families and keep the traditional family intact as well. So I really appreciate the work you guys are doing, Luke.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and again, thank you for this opportunity and to come on your radio show. We really appreciate that. We would love to be on.
Absolutely. Luke McCoy, it's a pleasure, sir, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
You too, Paul.
All righty. Folks, again, it's familycouncil.org if you want more information, and it's always it's good to talk to Luke. And I really, this article here on this is what's so fascinating to me. This is a different one, but I think this is where some of that newsletter came from. Infanticide is a big word. Roman law, religion, and the entire ethos of the ancient world saw nothing morally wrong with infanticide or with abandoning their newborns on the dung heaps or garbage dumps of cities. Then it says here that Romulus, the founder of Rome, had decreed back in the 8th century BC that no child could be killed before his 3rd year unless he was deformed. However, Romulus and his twin brother Remus, whom he killed, were themselves abandoned by their mother to die. And it says here, but a she-wolf, and there's a statue here, adopted them. And I think that's where you get that idea of being raised by wolves. Anyway, it's fascinating stuff. I'm reading from a website called earlychurchhistory.org, by the way. So fascinating stuff. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset. We're going to be back here with your meme of the day, also a wrap-up of the stories that we've covered today. So don't go anywhere. Conduit News, we'll be back here in just a moment.
On this, I don't know. But again, the letter of the law, if it's a clear violation of a law, what you're talking about is another issue.
Okay.
We have to be very clear about what the law is, and we have to follow the law. Because that's what the people expect us to do.
And just to be clear to the folks listening, the key is if you've got a sitting legislator who's found guilty or pleads guilty, and the idea is that this no contest, he pled no contest, even though he pled it under a different law. Obviously they contend that he actually isn't guilty yet, so there is some gray area there. But basically, if it's a public trust crime where you're a legislator, and in this case, it's alleged that he didn't pay taxes, then he has to be expelled, is what the other side's making. So it is fascinating. I mean, obviously, everybody wishes that they weren't in this situation or in this scenario. We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. I'll give you the last word, sir, about your announcing for re-election.
Well, I'm looking forward to going back and working on some things. There's 2 hot issues right now. I probably don't have time to get into these, but one of them is vaping. Our committee has had 2 meetings. I missed the last one because I had another commitment.
Excuse me.
That's a big issue. It's going to get bigger, and I don't have time to go into it, but there's 2 sides to that issue. I'll just give you one statistic. There's been 9 people, I believe it is, hospitalized in the state of Arkansas due to vaping.
Yeah.
6 or 7 of those have been found to use THC or some other
not the
illegal
nicotine
drug that they put into the device. But the other side of the problem is there's been according to the superintendent of the Bentonville schools who came to our committee, there's been a 400% increase in high school students doing vaping in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So that's another issue. So are we getting kids into smoking going through this device? So it's a big issue. You're going to hear a lot about that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And there's already been a proposed tax increase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second issue, of course, is violence in schools and in our stores and in our community. And I spoke to the West Side juniors and seniors a couple weeks ago, and that was one of the questions they asked me. It's a big issue. And we have to be careful about what we do here. We don't want knee-jerk reactions like Beto O'Rourke and come after our guns. That's not
right.
We're wasting energy by talking about that.
Yeah.
We do have to address this issue, and that's going to be a lot of debate in the coming months and years. My take on that is that it is a health issue. It's a mental health issue. And things like
violence in schools, or
the crisis center. People get in crisis. They get in situations where they're going to lash out. What we have to do is fix that problem. It's a mental problem. It's not a gun problem, a knife problem.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Back 870-275-9799 is the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the program. Last hour we did interview General Spaulding and Robert Spaulding, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General. His book, Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. You need to check out that interview if you missed it. We also discussed Iran and the Middle East, the president's policy towards Iran, his hesitancy to get involved in a Middle Eastern conflict. We talked about China and their taking dissidents and putting them in machines that keep them alive so that they can harvest their organs and sell them to people. Specifically, he mentioned Israel banning travel there because people were going there to contribute to this whole industry. China has made it a global industry for elites.
Do you know what else that sounds like?
Terrifying.
Yeah, a little bit.
What?
The Matrix.
Yes, it does.
Because that's what the robots use. They use human bodies for energy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a battery. Yeah, all to turn you in to this. Oh, I did see a meme. You got the red pill or the blue pill, and the meme, and it wasn't even a meme. It was just like, hey, don't take any pill from a guy wearing a trench coat and sunglasses.
It's just a picture of Morpheus.
Yeah, it's Morpheus like, hey, just don't take those pills. Like, don't.
Just ignore that
It's a false
guy.
choice. Yeah,
just ignore that.
That's
guy.
not wise.
There's always a third option.
We also covered Asa Hutchinson and the Little Rock School situation. The oversight is a state duty. He rejects claims that the new policy towards Little Rock School District is akin to resegregation, and that's some of his critics are saying that, which is preposterous. We talked about the interim study proposals on gun control being rejected by the Arkansas legislature. That's good. Hollywood is pouring praise on Greta Thunberg. They want to put her in charge of everything. The latest example, by the way, of pedophrasty, which is an argument involving children to prop up a rationalization and make the opponent look like an a-hole, as people are defenseless and suspend all skepticism in front of suffering children. Nobody has the heart to question the authenticity or source of the reporting, often done with the aid of pictures. This is what's happening with climate change and Greta Thunberg. It's also happening right here in Arkansas with Senator Jim Hendren using the kids and the vaping crisis to try to pass a 67% tax increase. If you're against the tax increase, you're somehow against the kids. They're also trying to say that money will go to school safety. And so we have pedophrasty on full display here in Arkansas as well across the world with this poor girl who's been brainwashed.
I'm gonna take this in a different direction real quick, and then we'll hop right back on to the train that we're going on right now. Hendren's argument sounds very familiar. You'll vote for this if you care about the veterans.
Oh, yeah, exactly right. Good catch there. Also, the Babylon Bee, we did cover this hilarious satire article. Marionette strings clearly visible during Greta Thunberg's testimony. Somebody saying, hey, wait a minute, during her speech. Those are puppet strings, kind of like on Thunderbirds. This caused some uproar, with everyone tracing the strings to see who had brainwashed this young girl into thinking the world was ending and pulling her strings. Some people got bored with her speech after that and just went and watched Thunderbirds, which had more interesting puppets and better acting. Security found the other end of the marionette strings hastily abandoned by whoever had been controlling her, and a man fitting the description of Al Gore driving off diving off the fire escape into a private jet. Thunberg slumped down in her chair and shortly woke out of her daze, angered and disappointed to find she had been exploited like this. I'm sure Snopes will fact-check this article, by the way, because they can't stand the satirical, humorous point that they are indeed making.
I can't. Okay, so while I was looking for meme of the day, I also came across a bunch of news articles and about all this stuff. I can't necessarily speak to the legitimacy of this because I didn't actually research it myself. But one of the things I came across was a news article that did say, it said that Thunberg, to get to the United States, because she was apparently in the U.S. recently.
No, she did. She took a boat,
a $6 million yacht.
Oh, it was? No, I thought. Well, maybe she did this time, but I heard she took some sort of carbon neutral footprint boat over here.
Yeah, I saw
or something like that. But it might have been more like a yacht.
The thing I ran across was a $6 million yacht.
At least she's trying to not be a giant hypocrite. You
know? No. Making the trip across the Atlantic.
I know. I don't know if it's a $6 million yacht though.
No, making the trip across the Atlantic on a boat in general is going to cost more in terms of carbon emissions than the carbon footprint you.
That's not what they say though.
I know, but the carbon so if you jump on a plane, the carbon footprint you emit for jumping on a plane, because you're on a plane with X number of people, so many people, it's so much less than a private boat.
Yeah, but what about a private jet though? See what I'm saying? Well, if the option is a private jet versus a boat, that's interesting though that they would do that. We also talked about Governor Hutchinson saying that the permit is approved for the Chinese. By the way, the body snatchers, right? Essentially, the Chinese are now organ snatchers. The governor announcing that a permit has been approved from the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality for his $1.5 billion Sun Paper project with the Communist Chinese. That was announced yesterday. He's also going to Dubai to look for business. And he's then going to India this weekend. Also, the Associated Press is now trying to, once again, promote a story that has been confirmed by anonymous people. We don't know, but they're claiming that Trump ordered aid frozen before his phone call with the Ukrainian president. And this is what it says. President Donald Trump ordered his staff to freeze nearly $400 million in aid to Ukraine a few days before a phone call in which he pressured the Eastern European nation's leader to investigate the family of political rival Joe Biden. Trump's order was first reported by the Washington Post and was confirmed to the AP by two people familiar with but not authorized to discuss private conversations they spoke on condition of anonymity. So we once again have this story out there, condition of anonymity. The president insists, though, that there was no pressure put on Ukraine. There was no quid pro quo. But he also says, but if there had been, it'd be fully justified. So if this $400 million in aid freeze, if it actually did happen, Trump was saying, we're talking about corruption. I don't want to send $400 million over there if they're not going to clean up their country. And the United States has been part of the corruption with Joe Biden and everything else. The Democrats are having an impeachment meeting later today at 4. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens this time tomorrow, where we will be this time tomorrow. I don't think they're going to be able to help themselves, but this is really about Joe Biden and Ukraine. This is really about Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party conspiring with Ukraine in the 2016 elections. This is also really going to be about China again. Really interesting to see everything that's coming to fruition here. It's also interesting to see, again, Arkansas having 6 deals with the Chinese government. Very, very weird. Here's your meme of the day. I think it's very appropriate. This courtesy of Superhero Don.
I have a name for this painting.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Socialist Gothic.
Yeah, the Socialist Gothic. That's very good. It's American Gothic, but instead you've got David Hogg and this what's her name? Thunderbird. Greta Thunberg. Yeah, Greta. This is Greta and David. We'll post this up at the Twitter feed at Conduit News. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and go to the YouTube channel and click the subscribe button, please, and the little bell so you can receive notifications when we go live. Arkansas, I hope you have a great day. Be safe.